for instance here, he could just pop one over and then pop the other 10 right on top, and there'd be very little his opponent could do. So right after you get Blink is where you get the aggression again. When you're going Stalkers with Blink, you have a big window early, or should I say a tiny window early on, but then you have another medium-sized-ish tiny window where you get to harass, poke in, and if any force fields get thrown down here, look at that, blinking directly in front. Pretty cool play, right? Pretty cool basic stuff going on. So that's an illustration of perhaps a little bit more aggression than you would normally be able to get away with, but still it's a good example of you put some pressure on with Stalkers, and then you just get Stalkers with Blink, and you can do all sorts of cool stuff. So we're going to take a look at another game where exactly that happens. Just again, it's a basic look at some of the early game implications to this opening, where we're pretty much just talking about the Stalkers with Blink and introducing the idea that they can do pretty sweet stuff. If you're really hungry for more replays where you see Blink being used effectively, watch White Ra against Tester from the Team Liquid Invitational, or I believe it was the Altitude Team Liquid Invitational, where you get the chance to see Tester do a very nice timing attack with a bunch of Blink Stalkers. So again, we're just looking at some early game tactics, abuses, nifty stuff that you can do with Stalkers with Blink. So here is Adele, who's a European player. I believe he's European. He's definitely played in a lot of the Zotac Cups. And I've been a big fan of Adele's play. I haven't actually gotten a chance to see that many games of his, but he does a very low gas style and expands quite a bit. So he's always sort of fun to watch. But of course, this replay set is on White Ra, so we are going to go ahead and focus on him a little bit more. There is the 12 gateway, ordinary timing. So is Adele. Pretty typical stuff. Chrono Boost going on the next side, making sure to get the probies out very quickly. There's a little bit of debate on what the best time to build a gateway is, but I would pretty much lump it into two categories: a 10 gate and a 13 gate. I would, especially if you're kind of like silver, copper, gold level players, just think of it as a gateway really fast, like a gateway on 10, versus a gateway after some probes, so a gateway on 13. Sure, 12 gates and 14 gates have their own little feels, but they're a little bit subtle when compared to those two. So either way, this is what I would call a little bit more economically focused gateway. Getting this out so that way we can get a cybernetics core pretty early. Bam, there it goes down. Going down on 18, you can actually get it at 17 if you just don't build this one probe. But this is the standard typical opening in Protoss vs. Protoss, so that is not a typical move in Protoss vs. Protoss. I wouldn't recommend experimenting around with selecting all your probes and having them stop mining. Might look cool, but I just steer you clear of that. So Adele is making a Zealot while his Cybernetics Core makes a pretty typical play. Most players are going to favor getting this Vespene Geyser, as we see White Ra has done, but of course I really like Adele because he does stuff like this. And there is the Warp Gate going down, and what we're going to see in this game is a very different opening that Adele is going to do when compared to the game that we just saw. In the game we just saw, Rigidity did something a little bit more standard. White Ra was able to break the front, do some damage, but here Adele is really going to try to put a ton of pressure on. First by getting this Zealot while the Cybernetics Core was making, and getting this Stalker up right when the Cybernetics Core finishes. So currently, look at this. The only thing that White Ra really has is one Stalker, but it's going to be one Stalker against a Zealot and another Stalker. So already a little bit of a hairy situation for White Ra. But we're still going to see how White Ra's build deals with this. Now, White Ra is getting this gateway a little bit earlier than last game. The other game, he just went for 2. I think you really can get away with getting 2 or 3 early on, so that's just some more subtle economy timing. But what we're seeing Adele do is not get this Geyser and just go 4-gate, punch you in the face style, right? He already has a pylon here, so he can reinforce very quickly. He's getting this probe to probably build a pylon up here to be very, 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 very aggressive. Only Stalkers coming out right now for White Ra. And see, here's one little change that we're seeing White Ra do. Just one sentry. You don't need to get a lot of sentries. Again, because the focus is Stalkers with Blink, and sentries do not get Blink. So don't get too many non-Stalker units, but still, having just a little change like this in your play isn't going to hurt you when you're going Stalker, Blink, and Protoss vs. Protoss. And as we can see, this is the sort of aggression you really have to be able to deal with in this matchup. There's players who are going to do this sort of stuff to you. This 4 warp gate, huge, crazy pressure because Stalkers and just a few Zealots are very, very intimidating mixes to deal with. So both players do have their warp gates up. We can see that Adele is a little bit ahead on food, but I want to point out how scary this actually is, because if we even go to the unit counting station, Adele is behind 3 probes, so he's actually ahead by a lot. Look at this, 6 Stalkers and 3 Zealots versus 5 Stalkers and 1 Zealot and 1 Sentry. So a lot of scary stuff can happen, and even though this 1 force field has gone down, this is still quite a big mix of units getting up into the front, and White Raw does manage to hold it off successfully. And yet another reason why I like Adele, with all this aggression, he's gearing up to expand, right? Really unusual style. Very, very different from what White Raw faced last game. And we're still going to see the cool abuses that you can get away with Stalkers with Blink. So we're going to go ahead and speed it up, because I did want to get the chance to see a lot of games today. And by a lot, I mean exactly 4. Exactly 4 games we are going to be checking out today. So Adele still being crazy aggressive. Probably would have preferred an earlier expansion, but you know, he has good intentions in his heart. He wants to get that expansion up. Yes, you do, little Adele. And here's the Stalkers with Blink coming up. There's the Blink. Is he chrono boosting it? Yes, he even had chrono boost saved. Not the fastest Blink in the world, but it is the eventual Blink. White Raw played around a lot with this timing. We saw him get a little bit more aggression favoring first in that game that we just watched. In this game, he's doing a little bit more defense first. And notice what's so cool about Stalkers with a Blink with just a few other units. If this huge force of Adele tries to pop in here, he can just force field. Nice little tactic, wandering out with all these Blink Stalkers, and then just staying at home. And also having all these guys hug right here, so it wasn't revealed by this pylon. And here comes White Raw right now, easily sniping off this pylon. Adele with, I thought, a very, very clever fast expansion. It is going to get shot at a little bit. Adele might be able to get back in time, but uh-oh, do not engage a larger Stalker army when it has Blink, because you will end up losing a lot of Stalkers. And that's one of those tactics. You know, it's kind of like speed Zerglings versus slow Zerglings. If there are ever any smaller amount of Zerglings encountering your big Zergling army, you just surround it and kill it. Same way with Stalkers, if you have Blink. You can almost think of that as a speed upgrade, so that lets you pop right in there. So Adele needs to be very careful with his army management. And look at this, 2 more Stalkers just isolated. If this were an ordinary early game, Adele would be pretty comfortable with this little mix of Stalkers, wouldn't really lose anything, and would just wait to get repositioned well. But Blink lets you pick off small numbers of units that are just outliers. And look, see, this is sort of a funny tactic, but it let White Raw peel all those units away from his front. So what turned into a little tactic to snipe off some pylons, to maybe snipe off some Stalkers, gets him some more, gets him the ability to get a little bit of breathing room and set up an offensive. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of Scout Colossus. I don't really care too much to scout with my Colossi. I'd probably prefer to use them in the actual attack, but either way, pretty cool little mix here by White Raw. And then look, bolstering the tactics that Blink provides him with just a nice normal push. Here's a very strong thing. Zealots, Sentries, a lot of Stalkers. What more can you ask for? But we still have the added benefits of being able to be a little more aggressive with our army now. I'm going to ignore this Dark Templar that managed to sneak in. If for some reason we get to this front and there's a bunch of units here, you know, throwing down force fields and we can't get up, we can always Blink up there and really force our army to get into the opponent's base. So that's awesome. And we're seeing this Dark Templar. I'm not really going to talk about it quite yet, but just suffice to note that Adele has already left the game, but apparently White Raw stayed in this replay just to watch this Dark Templar kill off as much as possible. Look at that. I wonder how long he's actually going to stay in this game. Is he going to kill all the probes? Well, he really wants to kill all those probes. I mean, I think he's the only one still in here. Alright, there we go. Yeah, killed off all the probes, and then went ahead and decided that it was time to leave the game. So, game 1, we got a good overall sense of what's up with Blinks with Stalkers. And in this game, I would say that we saw 3 really interesting things. The first one is that Blink Stalkers lets him do little tactics that buy him time and push the opponent back. He can get pylons, he can get small numbers of units. The second thing is that you already have a lot of Stalkers, which are just a good unit. So once you bolster with Zealots and Sentries, you have a really nice, solid push. Too often when I've seen players go Stalkers with Blink, they think that they're forced to go that all game long. You know, they'll get like 10 Stalkers with Blink, and that's their first attack. And their next attack will be 20 Stalkers with Blink. And then 5 minutes down the road, they have 40 Stalkers with Blink. You're allowed to make not Stalkers. And it actually turns out to be a pretty good idea. Because as we saw in this game, the second cool thing was that White Ross sort of did this loop around. And when he joined back with his army, it was a really nice, solid mix. And the third thing to note, which is what we're going to talk about this next game, is how do you transition out of this? Well, White Rot already showed us one possibility, which is to just get some Dark Templar. You already have the Twilight Council, just throw down a Templar Archives, and you can have an ability to kill your opponent who doesn't go for detection. So that is an interesting